education. And today we are meeting for a final installment of Amy Malloy's Classroom Mindfulness webinars. And it's our third meeting. I hope you are joining us for the third time. If not, if it's your first webinar on mindfulness, the previous two will be available on the website, and we'll be letting you know when that's available. And today, Amy will be talking about acceptance and compassion. I'm saying hello to everyone in the chat who's sending lovely messages. Fantastic to see you all from everywhere, every corner, and I hope you are all doing fantastic. So without much more delay, and one more thing, with the certificates, we'll be sending them after this webinar. If you haven't received them from the previous webinar, be assured that you will receive them. So we will have all certificates for all the webinars you have attended. So if you haven't received them yet, please stay with us. They will be coming your way shortly, in a matter of a few days. We just experienced some technical glitches that we've been resolving, so really sorry for that. Now I will just pass on to Amy, and I hope you will enjoy this webinar, and thank you for joining us.
Today, it's really nice to be back with you again, and to see some familiar names coming up, which is lovely. And I hope you've all been well. I hope wherever you are in the world, you are well at the moment. If you are indoors and having to stay at home, then let's embrace the beauty of technology for what it can bring us today. I know we do talk about some of the negatives of it, but actually today what it means is that if any of you are isolated at the moment, then I'm so sorry you're going through that, and it's really nice that we can still be talking online, which is really nice. So maybe some of these practices will help during that. So welcome everybody. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Amy Malloy, and I am a mindfulness and yoga teacher, well-being teacher from the UK. And I also have a background in English language teaching and in materials development for primary and in assessment development as well. So I've worked for a major global publisher as well for most of my career before moving into working in well-being. So now I'm bringing the two practices together in a beautiful fusion, bringing mindfulness to the ELT classroom, which I'm really honoured to do. For those of you who are new to the webinar series, we'll be going through some of the things that we've talked about before. You can find out in the other recordings, but we'll have a little review of some of the concepts just so that everything makes sense today. Okay. So about today's webinar, so as Joanna was saying, excuse me, excuse me, the session will be recorded. So within the next 2 weeks, you'll receive an email link, certificate of attendance Joanna's just said about, and any questions. I know often questions do come up, don't they? So what we'll do is please pop them in the chat box and we'll keep a note of them, or you can keep a note of them on your pad or your phone next to you and pop them in the chat box at the end. We'll have some time for questions then. Okay, and you can always email us as well if anything pops up later on. Okay, so what we'll learn today. So we're going to remind ourselves of what mindfulness is, why it's important for the ELT classroom, just as our baseline, as our foundation. We'll review the key skills of mindfulness and just a little brief overview of what we've covered so far, but not in too much detail. And then we'll look at the final skill to introduce to your students, which is compassion and acceptance. Which is the kind of magic source of mindfulness. and how to bring this skill into your school. So when we're working with more reflective practices like this, or anything around that starts to tap into self-esteem and compassion, there's lots of things we can do, and also some things to be sensitive about as well. So we'll have a little look at that. And then we'll look at a final phase in our mindfulness practice plan for the year. Okay, so let's look at our quote for today. Meditation is to be aware, and we use meditation here as kind of interchangeable with what we're talking about with mindfulness today, okay? Because the two apply. Is to be aware of every thought and of every feeling, never to say it is right or wrong, but just to watch it and move with it. So have a little reflect on that and see. That's really covers our theme for today. So let's have a look, a little review of all about mindfulness and why it's important. So again, we came to last couple of times, we've looked at our view of mindfulness and said that this picture of our two people in their robes, looking quite peaceful, sitting on a pole with their beads, that is there will be reasons for that practice perhaps in a religious context or a spiritual context for them. But what we're talking about here is a secular practice. It doesn't need to be sitting like that, wearing that in that kind of location. Mindfulness can be practiced everywhere and anywhere, by any religion, any non-religion, any country, any culture. There is an access point to that for you, and that's what we're looking at today. So what is mindfulness? As always, the best way is to have a go. And I know those of you who've joined us before have quite enjoyed our little beginning mindfulness practices. So let's have a go now. Those of you who are new to this, that's absolutely fine. Have a go, join in, or simply watch and try again later. Okay, so today we're just going to take a moment to sit still. So if you're sitting down, maybe you're on the bus, commuting on your phone and watching on your phone as you commute, or maybe you're in an office or at home. Maybe you're walking along the street listening on your iPhone, and maybe have a stop and see if there's somewhere that you can just stop and close your eyes for a moment, or take a soft gaze just down at somewhere in front of you, so that you're basically creating your own little space. Okay, it doesn't need to be anywhere in particular. Close the eyes if you feel comfortable. And beginning to just notice your breath. Just notice it going into the body and out. Into the body and out. And then growing aware, just noticing what your feet feel like on the floor. Maybe having a gentle move of the toes in the shoes or against the floor. Notice that feeling. Notice the connection of your legs with the chair, your tailbone. And just really noticing your connection with the floor, with the earth. And then growing aware of any sounds around you in the room or outside. Just allowing those sounds to be. Rather than forcing them away, just allow them to come and go without attaching a label. And then growing aware of your breathing again. So just noticing the breath going in and out of the nose. And out. Noticing the breath going in. And notice it going out. And if the mind needs to wander, that's okay. Just allow it to wander. and come back again as soon as you notice that it's wandered. And then maybe noticing if there is any sensations in the body right now. Maybe some emotions or physical sensations. Imagine scanning down from the top of the head all the way down to the feet, and just notice where the attention is drawn. All the while just staying gently focused on the breath, just noticing what's going on in the body. And if you notice a sensation or a feeling that feels particularly prominent today, maybe pop it on a little table and start to notice the colour that it might have, that feeling. Maybe notice if it has a shape or a texture. Just start to picture the feeling in your mind, staying with your breath. Still focusing on the breath going in and out of the nose, but also just watching the feeling and seeing what happens if you just observe it. Notice what colour it is, what shape. Maybe it has a texture. And just find a little bit of curiosity about it. And then saying to yourself in your mind, whatever it is, this is okay. Whatever this is, it's okay. And taking a big deep breath in, nice and slow and full. And a nice slow breath out. One more. And out. Lovely. And slowly coming back into the room, into the space. Blinking open the eyes, have a little stretch. And just notice how you're feeling. Notice what your experience was like. What you noticed about your body and what it felt like to just accept what was happening. And welcome back into the space, everybody. Nice to see you. Marta feels calmer. That's nice to see. Lovely. Thank you. You feel alive, Danica. I love that. Feeling alive. Beautiful. We'll just wait for one more piece of feedback on that and how you found it. Hello. Hello, Oksana. And feel light, interesting, harmonized. And what's interesting there is, if you notice, we didn't try and change anything there, did we? We just watched what was there and we were curious about it and we almost made friends with it. We gave it something that felt familiar, gave it a colour or a shape. And actually what's come from that, even though maybe some of those feelings might have been a difficult sensation, maybe there was a bit of back pain or something heavy that you're holding emotionally today. And actually what's coming from that is that it feels peaceful to sit with that rather than push it away. So that's kind of what we're working with today. And that's the final skill in our mindfulness practice, is to start to learn to accept and have compassion for what we're feeling, whatever it is. So what we've noticed here, for those of you that are joining for the first time, coming back to our definition, is that mindfulness is the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally to things as they are. And that's from John Kabat-Zinn, who's someone definitely worth looking up. He brought mindfulness based stress reduction. He took mindfulness, spiritual meditation practices from Eastern cultures and brought them over to America, and essentially secularized the practice, and so took out of it what made sense for a non-religious, secular context, looking more at the neuroscience and the medical benefits of it. So he's done quite a lot of really interesting writing on applying mindfulness to a more secular context. It's definitely worth looking at his writings and his materials. So what's really important here is we're talking about the awareness. Now, wherever you were, we were all practicing mindfulness there. It didn't matter what you were doing at the time. It didn't matter what you were wearing. It didn't matter where you were. The awareness that comes from it. And there are many different vehicles to that awareness. Meditation is a really efficient one because it gives us that space and that stillness to observe what's going on without any other movement. But some people find, so yoga is another way through to, yoga is essentially a mindfulness practice. It's a moving meditation with the same goal of finding peace in the mind. So maybe it's movement, maybe it's walking, maybe it's mindfully listening to a piece of music and really notice what's going on. Yes, Marta, that was meditation we did a moment ago. We were practicing a meditation there. Throughout this set of resources and talks and blogs, we're presenting meditations, but also lots of different other activities that you can do with students as well. It's through meditation that we start to notice some of the more powerful benefits in the brain and the neuroplasticity and the changing towards a calmer nervous system, because we're really using the breath, and it's the breath that helps the nervous system re-regulate itself and come into balance. So that's why meditation is particularly powerful, and yoga. But as I say, in order to tap into that awareness and to step out of autopilot, which we looked at before, step out of that automatic pilot feeling of just being totally in your head and not noticing what's going on around you, there are many different practices to access that awareness as well. So just reviewing why it's important and why now in ELT. I think this is particularly important today that we talk about this, particularly for ELT. As we know, the world is speeding up. Technology is speeding up. As I say today, it's a great thing because it means that some of you who might be in isolated situations at the moment due to COVID-19, that means that we're able to talk, and also we're far away from each other too, which means that we can also talk even though I'm in the Cotswolds and you're in all your wonderful places around the world. And Joanna's in London, so even Joanna and I aren't together. So yeah, let's celebrate technology today, but we have to admit that also it's bringing with it a sense of instant information, an expectation that we can constantly and instantly communicate, be in touch. Social media is always there for comparison, so that the mind can't keep up with the speed that technology is moving and what it expects from our brains. And as such, our children and our teenagers with their really small developing brains, there's a mental health crisis because they don't know what to do with this comparison and the addiction hormone that comes from social media. Why for ELT? So high stakes assessment is huge in ELT. It's really, English for social mobility. It can have a real impact on your school career, on your life. It could even get you a visa for another country. And it's all about the numbers on a scale, on CEFR level. There's so many amazingly more mature and developed resources out there now, like the Global Scale of English, which obviously allows for much more granular measuring, but we're still measuring people. We're still comparing them to a desired state, and so the sensitivity around that is something that we're going to be talking about today, and how to handle that sensitively. But there is a high pressure to achieve, and if we're in stress, like we've looked at in that previous point, actually our memory and our language functions are reduced, because when we're running away from a threat, if we're in fight or flight, we're stressed, we don't need to be able to use our language creatively and remember little details. So that's why it's important now. It's a bit of a powder keg situation. Mindfulness helps us see what's real. and what's not real around us. So it helps us see all the little social structures that are going on around us. It really helps us to see things as they are. So not just looking at the grass, looking at the trees, because we can see those with our eyes. It's a sense of understanding how we are relating with the world, what things are putting pressure on us, whether we can see them or not, what we enjoy, what we don't enjoy, what's going on with other people around us, how we're contributing, how they're contributing to us. So how all of that social structure around us, it helps us see what that is, and it helps us understand what matters, perhaps, and what is really a threat to our stress level, to our body and to our survival, and what isn't. So it helps us recognize what is a real threat and what is perceived. And it also, as we were talking about just before, using the breath, it regulates the nervous system in response to a perceived threat. So we get less stressed about what we do see. So then when we get into this situation of feeling socially isolated for not meeting a certain standard, not comparing to a certain social expectation that might be placed on us by social media or by anything around us, really, the government, our culture, that's simply not viewed as a threat, because our children and us, we learn a calmer, less critical way of experiencing the world. So we're not looking at how we're seeing the world as we are and as it is. Okay, so we're noticing how we are, and we're also noticing the world how it is, not just looking at it through our own filter. So the key skills of mindfulness, coming back to them, so we've looked at paying attention on purpose, focus, and autopilot in webinar 1. So you can watch that again at the link that Joanna's popped in the chat box. Paying attention to things as they are. So we looked at observation last time in webinar 2. And today we're looking at non-judgmentally, that part of the definition. So looking at acceptance and compassion. And you can see that all of those things are going into our mindfulness pot there. Let's have a look at acceptance and compassion. So when we're focusing on the present moment, it's okay if things feel good, isn't it? That's absolutely fine. It's actually really nice to sit and think, oh, the sun's shining. Doesn't that feel lovely? I'm really enjoying being here in the pleasant present moment. But what happens if we sit in the present moment and we really focus in and we take ourselves out of our heads, out of our to-do list, and we really focus on what's going on right now? Maybe we start to sense that things aren't that pleasant. Maybe we have some mental health challenges. Maybe there's some feelings of depression and low mood. Maybe there's anxiety and stress. Maybe there's physical pain. Maybe there's a difficult social or personal situation going on, or professional situation. Maybe there's just something that we don't want to experience. And the mind has a very good way of protecting us from things that don't feel good, particularly when they really are a threat to our survival. It teaches us to either overthink, so work it out in our heads rationally, go, right, okay, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix this. And that will make it all better. And it also, the other option is to completely push it away. So it just protects us, really. If it's too painful, it'll push it away for us. In certain situations, in traumatic circumstances, that's a really important survival mechanism for our well-being. However, what we're finding in this modern age is that actually that sense of aversion, of pushing things away or overthinking, is being applied to little things, seemingly little things. So we're starting to use that function for things that aren't necessarily a threat to our survival, but our nervous system sees them as such. And so that's why it can be very easy when we're sitting in the present moment and things don't feel so good to try and jump away. It's not very easy, and we want to sit away from that. So that's why acceptance is a really important skill for accepting what is good, and also when it doesn't feel so good in the present moment, and giving us the skills and the space to sit with that without panicking. And as I say, we're not talking about really traumatic situations here where the body is in total auto response for survival. We're talking about everyday situations here. Okay, so just to be clear, it's still okay to run away from a tiger, an actual tiger. So it can be easy to summarize. It can be easy to sit with the present moment when things feel good. And it can feel difficult to do this when things don't feel good. So mindfulness helps us learn about how we tend to respond to difficult feelings. Do we push them away or overthink? Because sometimes we don't even know how we're doing that. It just helps us know what our tendencies are, what's our habit. And in time, we learn to accept them and even welcome them when they're there. Now, that might seem quite a difficult alien concept at the moment, particularly if you're new to this kind of practice. Just reminding you that we are kind of we're on phase 3 now, and we've talked a lot about how we don't start running a marathon from day one. We can only be in the mind that we have today. So this is the sort of awareness that grows, like walking into a dark room. At first, you just see nothing, and then in time, more detail might come out of what you're looking at. Your eyes adjust, so our mind adjusts, our inner eye adjusts to viewing the present moment and noticing what to look for and how to sit with that. So if this is further along in your mindfulness journey than where you are currently, that's absolutely fine, and you don't need to worry if that's not your experience of this yet, but in time it will come. So just understanding the theory for now. I've just seen a quick question here. How could we practice it and how often? Quantity. Elizabeth, thank you for that question. Really important. We will cover it before we go. We'll look at that in detail. Okay. Why don't we like difficult feelings? Well, if we go back to this social expectation, in the first webinar we looked at this idea that back in prehistoric times, very, very primitive times, we might have been pushed out of the troop if we weren't seen to be out of the troop, out of the tribe, if we were seen to be not adhering to social structures that would keep the tribe safe. So you wouldn't get a share of the food, you wouldn't get a share of the protection. So not adhering, not being part of the pack was a dangerous thing. And so our nervous system learnt to view this as in the same way, and to respond to it in the same way as it would to a physical threat in front of us, to our survival. So that's why, we don't like difficult feelings, because for some reason, something about those difficult feelings either suggests to us there's a threat, or it suggests to us that there's a threat there because society suggests that isn't a safe thing to be feeling. Okay, so maybe it's if you're feeling low mood and depression, it's changing, but for a long time it's been a bit of a stigma around that, about being not being happy all the time, not being cheerful all the time, and that sense, if you're not feeling happy, can then start to spiral, because you can think, oh well, I'm not actually part of the, I'm not going to be accepted because I'm not feeling how I should feel in this situation. So it comes back to that social acceptance point, and that can start to feel like a threat to our nervous system as well. So that's why we don't like them. We want to fix them. Our body is hardwired to try and fix difficulties. It's just that it's fixing too many difficulties sometimes and causing us more suffering than it needs to. There's also the idea that this is permanent. Okay, so we don't like difficult feelings because it's very difficult to see outside of them when you're in them. And it comes back to that idea that we looked at last time of thoughts not defining us and feelings not defining us. When we're in a waterfall, it feels like everything is thundering down around our ears. When we step back and we look at the waterfall from afar, we can see that actually that water's going that way, that water's going that way. Mindfulness gives us that ability to step back a bit, to give us some space, some perspective, and see that difficult feelings aren't permanent and they won't last forever, that there is shift and flux. But training the mind to understand this takes some practice. So the final skills that we are looking at then are understanding impermanence, acceptance, and kindness. Okay, so acceptance is the greatest kindness that you can pay to yourself, and we'll look more at that as well. So coming into how we can practice this and why. So I want to ask you to say how, and maybe think back to the meditation practice we did at the start. How do you feel when you read this? Or if I just tell you, it's okay. What does that feel for you? It's okay. Danica feels neutral. Great. Excited. Positive. Reassuring. It's just enough. Acceptance. Good. Lovely. Brilliant. So let's think supported, relief. Positive, relief, understanding. Really lovely words coming through here. And hello, Lithuania. Hello, Lena. So it's really nice to hear that. That's really interesting because actually, I mean, I have no idea what might have popped into your mind when I suggested that, or when we were doing the meditation earlier, what kind of experiences you might have been observing in yourselves. All that's changed here is someone saying it's okay. So we've changed the expectation around that feeling, around that situation. So we've observed it, and now we are allowing it. We are giving it permission to be. We're not trying to change it. And that's what's really important, is that mindfulness is not trying to change your thoughts. It's not trying to change your feelings. It is looking at the relationship that you have with your thoughts and your feelings. So what we are changing is your relationship with those, so that it's easier to sit with things. It doesn't cause a panic. We're looking at the story around a situation and reframing that story around it rather than changing the situation that it's in itself. So hearing that word, it's okay, is the crux of what we're looking at today, that everything is okay, even if it doesn't seem it. So does anyone remember Dave? We met Dave last time. He's going to teach us a little bit about how we can practice this and why. Dave had lots of thoughts and feelings in his head going on, if you remember. So whatever he's doing, he's thinking and feeling different things about that situation. So he had a lens on the situation. That's what we looked at last time. So it's not just him in that situation. His responses to his friend there as he's having a cup of tea will be determined by the thoughts and feelings in his head, his lens on the situation. Remembering our quote that we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. So remembering that. And what mindfulness, if you remember, helps us notice is what's in our lens. So it gets to that little point as we look into our lens, and it gives us that tiny slither of space just to notice what's going on and what we're feeling. Okay. Now, interestingly, just as we saw then, and we kind of got an idea of with that it's okay experiment, is that how he views that situation will change as soon as an expectation is set upon it. So his thoughts and feelings about it will change, won't they? So he compares and tries to change it if it isn't how it wants to be. So we've got our little measuring stick here. That's his situation. That's how it actually is. But perhaps he has an ideal expectation about how it should be. Maybe on social media, they should be in a different cafe, or he should be wearing something different, or be seen with different people. He should be happier. He should be there at all, or shouldn't be there at all. Whatever that expectation is, it will have been there before social media. So the reason social media is so successful is because that's what we do. We like to compare ourselves to others, to check that we're in the right, that we're part of the pack. And so that idea, it's just made it much more tangible, and in our everyday. But that concept is in our minds at all times. Those of you who are interested in assessment, you might know that comparative judgment, adaptive comparative judgment assessment scales work on exactly this way of judging one thing against another. However, when we're trying to fix emotions and feelings, it's not that helpful, because we're using our head to try and fix that discrepancy. We're trying to change the situation to meet how we want it to be, rather than looking at our lens on it and how we can accept that and just accept where we are without worrying about being at that ideal point too much. Maybe the actual point could become the ideal that we didn't realize it was. It's just a thought. So let's look at how this could affect us in ELT. We've talked a couple of times about language frameworks and ability. When you've got your child, your student, and they're learning English, the moment we assess them, we're doing a really soft formative assessment in class. Maybe it's just teacher judgment, just kind of observational assessment and notes. Maybe it's gentle quizzes and tests. Maybe it's something more formal. Maybe it's one of the higher stakes exam suite tests, and the same with adults as well. The moment we pop them into a standardized assessment system, we're creating a discrepancy with how we want them to be, how we think they should be, and the communication around that is so important. Yes, we need to understand what levels are so that we can have some sense of standard ability and level. Otherwise it wouldn't be possible. For people to move and communicate, we need to understand where people are and create structures around things. But how we treat that discrepancy is where mindfulness can really help, as well in ELT, particularly around exam season, and really allowing the student and our approach to the student, our communication around it, to be around where they are. And have a mindful approach to where they need to get to, not a discrepancy stress approach to you need to be there, you're not there, and allow that panic to set in. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense a little bit. So John Kabat-Zinn, my favourite person. This is one of my favourite things ever. We can't stop the waves, but we can learn to surf. Okay, so what we're not doing here, we're not trying to stop waves coming. Life will be a wave of mood, of positive and negative, ups and downs. Sometimes those waves will be really little in your day, and the less pleasant thing will last a few minutes, and the pleasant thing will last a few minutes. It'll be little things. Sometimes you might feel like you're in a downwards rut for ages and ages and ages, but there are waves in life. Okay, and framing our understanding of our experience is where this acceptance place comes in with mindfulness. Okay, let's look a little bit at that. How can we do that? How can we experience the present moment, whatever it holds, safely, without getting into this round and round and round discrepancy fixing headspace? What mindfulness helps us to do is move, actually, believe it or not, even though we are noticing, we're using our mind, we're talking about training the brain, but what we are doing is we're moving out of the head and into the body. And what I mean by that is we're moving out of that prefrontal cortex rationalizing space, and into the body and into a sensory understanding of the present moment. And by doing that, we can create space between our experience and our analysis of it. So we learn to notice in that time. So I don't know if you maybe noticed it in the few minutes that we were practicing at the start of this webinar, that we learn to notice that physical sensations shift actually, and they start to change. I don't know if anyone noticed that maybe the colour changed or the shape changed, or if it was feeling particularly heavy, if it was feeling particularly heavy, that the sensation got a little lighter, maybe just by sitting with it, and some of you felt a little more peaceful. So we notice that physical sensations shift, and in turn, there's a sound issue. Okay, really sorry about that. We haven't changed anything, so I hope everything's okay. In short, it helps us see that nothing is permanent, because in turn we can see that our thoughts are shifting too, if that makes sense. So that's what we're trying to do here, is that we are trying to get a sense that if you notice when we said it's okay, maybe there was a slight little shift in your relationship to something that you were thinking about or envisaging when we talked about that. That was a tiny shift. So nothing is permanent. Nothing is going to stay exactly as it is. And that's a really key message at the heart of what we're looking at here. Let's think about forcing away, pushing away. If we force something away that's in our path, so here's Dave, he's found a big old boulder in his path, and he's pushing and pushing. I don't want this to be here. I don't want this obstacle to be here. So he's pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And what he's doing there is he's creating friction. In nature, if you push your hands together, you create force, don't you? You create energy there. Energy is created through force and friction, and that creates disturbance. So what we're not trying to do is we're not trying to force anything away, because that will amplify the energy and the attention and the difficulty around the situation. In the second situation here, he's just getting on and climbing over it. It might not be that easy to climb over it. I'm not saying that it's necessarily straightforward, but he's not pushing and creating force. He's gently just working with it over and over and over. So looking at this, there's an American author and writer about mindfulness called Jack Cornfield, and he said something which I really like. He says, to let go does not mean to get rid of. To let go means to let be. And when we let be with compassion, things can come and go on their own. What I'd like you to try as a little experiment just on your own at home sometime is to get some corn flour or cornstarch, however you call it in your country, and pop it in some water and give it a stir. Those of you who are bakers might know what I'm talking about here. And when you try and move it quickly with your spoon, it will get stuck. But if you move it slowly through, steadily through, then it will flow. And that's a sort of idea that if just practicing that might give you a bit of an idea of what I'm going on about here in your mind, and kind of the relationship with difficulty that we can have. So there's one thing to have a little try out. It might not make sense to you, so don't worry if it doesn't. How can it help children specifically? We looked last time at how the thought spiral can get involved. So here's our little student with a thought pulse. I've got a test today. And then she starts thinking, do I know it all? What if I don't? I probably won't. I'm going to fail. I always fail. And that core belief of I always fail will get reframed, because once that thought trail has been created, the body is habitual. It's not going to reinvent the wheel next time. It's going to go down there again and again and again. And the core belief gets reframed. So then she'll reach adulthood and just assume she's always a failure. That thought spiral of associations and habitual patterns is something that we can stop. We can become aware of it. We can let it be, and we can make a conscious choice to have a different relationship with that thought of I've got a test today. So acceptance is about teaching our students to be kind to themselves. So the thought there hasn't changed. The situation that she's got a test hasn't changed. I've got a test today. And at that point where the thought spiral begins, she says, I feel nervous. And then what does she say here? But that's okay. I'll try my best. And she's shifted that thought pattern. She's made a conscious choice to just say, oh, well, that's okay. Of course I'm going to feel nervous. You always feel nervous when you have a test. That's fine. So she's found a kinder relationship with herself and with her thoughts. And what's happened at the bottom there is that final belief, that core belief is, I'll try my best. I always try my best. And that idea of I always fail, it's not that we've pushed it away. She just hasn't gone to it, and in time, our mind will forget that. It will start to rebuild a new, more positive, kinder, more compassionate relationship with the self. And therefore, if we're being kind to ourselves, we're going to be kinder to others as well. Kindness starts from the self. We need to be kind to yourself, and then you will be able to be kind to others. It's true, not easy to do. That's really right, Justina, and that's why we spend so much time talking about it, because it isn't easy. Even as adults, we don't find it easy. And not everybody will find, and we'll talk about this in a moment, not everyone will find the concept of being kind to themselves easy, particularly if they have a difficult background at home. If they have a difficult background at home, then maybe they've been taught that, there isn't much kindness at home, so or in their past. So this can be something that's difficult, and that's definitely something to be sensitive around with certain students. But being kind to themselves and kind to the others. So noticing habitual negative thought patterns. We're not trying to push anything away. It's about being aware of those and making a conscious choice to feel differently and view our situation differently. So we're noticing the thought pattern, but the thought pattern is not the thought. The thought is, I've got a test today. The pattern and spiral that follows after that is something that we can just allow and just go, oh, I always think that. I don't need to follow it. I can just watch that come and go. That's fine. I'm okay here, and I don't need to listen to it. Okay, so we're not stopping it happening or substituting or changing anything. We're not changing our thoughts, we're changing our relationship with our thoughts. So we can allow ourselves to go, okay, I can see that going off down there. I don't have to believe it, because I know that it's okay to be feeling like this. That's just my thought habits telling me that, that's just thoughts. Thoughts will tell me stuff. They're not facts. I know that I feel nervous, and that's okay. If that makes sense. It is very similar to growth mindset. I'm just going to draw that out from Isabella there. This is really similar to growth mindset. It's what we're talking about here. It all comes from a similar pot, doesn't it? So let's get practical. I'm so sorry. I'm just so excited talking about all of this with you. I've run over a little bit. So let's get into the practical nitty gritty, shall we? Because I did promise that to Elizabeth. 3 activities to practice acceptance and compassion. So the first is a meditation, a bit like we tried at the start. And what's really exciting is that Joanna and I we've recorded some really nice little meditations for you to use in class with your students. They're language leveled, so they should be at a level that's accessible for your students, and there'll be resources around those as well coming up. But there's also some for you to try at home too, so you can have a go. So the acceptance meditation, scanning down the body, noticing any emotions present, see if there's a physical sensation attached to that rather than getting caught up in the thoughts of fixing it. So looking into the body, what colour is it? What shape is that sensation? Maybe could it have a name, like Bob? My anxiety is called Stephen. I don't know. Sorry if there's anyone called Stephen listening. But, so this is a really nice thing to try. But again, trying it later on in their practice, so that when they're getting used to the idea of focusing, you need to go through the phases. If you're coming to this from day one, go back through the phases and come to this later on. Another idea that you can start anytime, really, and I love this, I do this with my children, decorate a glass jar or container. Every time you do something kind for someone else or for yourself, you put a marble or a button or a pebble, something, little unit of something, into the jar, and just make a note of how you feel each time you do it. And then the changing scenes activity. This is another really nice one to do over the course of a week, or you can do it over the course of a term, or even you could do it over the course of a day and you'd still get something from it. So taking a photo of the same view out of the classroom window every day for a term, or as I say, a week or whatever, make a display of the photos and discuss what changes you can see. So what you can do with this is really point out that bad weather, the seasons, is not permanent, but also neither is good. So the flowers, the blossom, whatever you have, sunshine isn't permanent either, but life goes on and we're still okay. So everything is still okay despite bad and good weather. Okay, so hopefully those are 3 little activities that we can try. So sensitivity and acceptance culture. So we've talked a little bit about this, being sensitive around focusing on difficult feelings. So not everyone finds it easy to focus on or accept difficult feelings. For some, it can be too intense, and especially, but not always, if there's abuse or trauma at home. So always, general rule of thumb, always allow the option of having the eyes open, so that don't go too much into emotional memories, traumatic memories. So always allow the eyes to be open. Stick to those breath practices maybe that we did in phase 1 with those kinds of students, and maybe the changing scenes idea, and the kindness jar, that kind of thing. Something that's a bit more grounded for students that might be experiencing those difficulties or are finding it hard. And never force a child to do a mindfulness meditation. That's really important. It has to be their choice, and they all want to do it. Okay, because we're talking about acceptance, not forcing anyone into anything here. Okay, so if you've got any concerns about a particular child, really recommend you have a chat with their carer, their healthcare professional as needed. Okay. I'm going to answer that in a second about tomorrow. That's a really interesting point about meditation and mindfulness. Acceptance and compassion as part of a wider school culture. I know not all of you, I might be preaching here to a bunch of people who completely agree, but perhaps have slight difficulties convincing colleagues or whatever. But as part of a wider school culture of compassion and acceptance, that both good and difficult feelings are accepted as generally as being okay. The effort is rewarded, as well as numeric or summative assessment achievement in class and in homework, and that we're really sensitive around formative and progress assessment, so that we really are looking at the child and really encouraging and celebrating where they are, and helping them move forward mindfully through to the next phase. So looking at, okay, like, there's no problem that you're here. What can we do next? What's the next step for you? So looking at progress rather than it being a negative discrepancy of where they need to get to and they must get there. I know that's difficult as well in some cultures with parental influences as well, which might be more pressurized. So I appreciate it's not always easy. There's a lot we can do in the classroom to support that. With summative assessment and high stakes tests, if you're entering students for those, this idea of no mark is a failure, that next time we'll try better. This idea of growth mindset is really important, that we haven't got that mark yet, but it doesn't matter, because look at all the other great things that we've achieved as well, and really try doing what you can to mitigate that discrepancy between where they are on a scale and where they're meant to be because society says so, or some kind of higher governing body says so. So anything you can do around that is really supportive and helpful, okay, as a wider culture. So the plan, developing, hang on a minute, I've got getting confused. Mindfulness gives us more time and space to respond, and often we may discover the wisest way of responding is to do nothing at all. Okay, so this is a really lovely thing to leave you with, that is what we're thinking about here, is the serenity prayer. It doesn't need to be a religious thing. I think you can draw a nice secular social message from this. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So taking that space between a situation happening, and your response to it is what mindfulness gives us as well. So when we start observing the present moment, we become much more aware of lots of things, good and bad. Our minds learn to observe and accept good and bad rather than panic. And mindfulness is like a gym for the mind. The more training, the fitter it becomes. So we're training the mind over time, just remembering that. So learning to accept. Week 1, try the body scan again, which we did in webinar 1. I think, again, we're going to have recordings of that. And then that's really good just to get back into that idea of noticing what's going on in the body and focusing back into the body a bit. And then if it's appropriate for your students, try the acceptance meditation. And as an ongoing, try that for a week as well. And you can then carry on a regular mindfulness practice as you see fit. Keep the kindness jar going and the photographing of the same view outside. I mean, that might be a lovely kind of 365 days of the year project or a whole school year. So just seeing that. And as always, after each practice, encourage the students to write down or draw pictures of how they felt during the mindfulness practice and what they noticed afterwards. Because our mind is changing and our view on the world is changing, it can be really interesting for them to see their journey and helps them reflect and some of those insights bed in a little bit. I'll just show you quickly where to find the recordings. They will be available soon. Oh, Joanna's just put the link in. I've just popped it on the screen as well. There you will find all my blog articles from this year, and they follow this content with a few extra bits in there as well. I really enjoyed recording a podcast with Pearson, so that's on there as well. And then all the resources. So there's an introduction guide on there that you can download and print, and there'll be worksheets and recordings coming up very, very soon. But please let me know if you've got any questions. I'll just, while you're typing them, I will I would just answer that question from Tamara, I think it was, about what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation. So meditation is one of the practices. Mindfulness meditation in particular is a practice, it's a vehicle towards with the view of finding mindful awareness. When we meditate, we're focusing on the present moment or on one thing in particular, and that when we put our attention on something, it brings awareness to it and energy around it. So as soon as we focus on something, we bring our awareness to it. Meditating is creating a quiet space to focus the mind on one thing and draw awareness of it. So that's when mindfulness is the awareness that comes from meditation, if that makes sense. So hopefully that helps. I'm really, thank you for the lovely comments. I'm really glad it has been helpful. Evaluation segment, Zorona said about the mindfulness practices. Again, it's not something to be assessed as such, but you might find that inquiring with the students about their experience will help you get an idea, just a formative idea of what's working. But if they're keeping regular mindfulness journals or picture journals or any kind of written or drawn evidence of their insights, that can give you an idea of the journey they're going on and the sort of impact it's having. Maybe you might even start to notice some improvement in your summative assessments as well, if they're less stressed around exams and they feel calmer, and so the benefits and the impact will be for you to start to notice in other areas as well. So call it more of a secondary impact evaluation, but don't be too kind of strict on it. Just be clear about that's an intervention that you've started, and noticing the benefits, but we don't want to create too many rules or shoulds around, you should do this, you should do that around this practice, because the whole idea is that we're trying to dispel a little bit of that. Okay. They told me, am I a child psychologist too? I'm not a child psychologist. I have a master's in language assessments, in young learners language assessments. So I've done a lot of academic work around how children's minds work in a test environment and developing assessments. So I do know quite a lot about that, and through I'm a children's yoga teacher as well, so I learned some through that as well, but not a clinical psychologist. Told me they were falling asleep, noticed how tired they were, so they thought that was not good. I think it's wrong to be tired. Oh no, absolutely fine to be tired. I always have a nap sometimes, sometimes it just depends. Find the right time of day to do it, but also remember that if they are busy, and then they stop and they start to focus on the present moment, maybe they then relax, they realize how tired they are, the mind realizes how tired it is, and it starts to want to have a sleep. So if the mind needs a sleep, that's fine. They can, that's absolutely fine to feel tired. Maybe it's just their body's way of saying that they need a bit more rest. Yeah. Okay. How to practice mindfulness students with students that have mental issues. So again, I think we talked a little bit last time, Danica, about kind of autism spectrum. It can be really brilliant for children who are just experiencing low mood and depression and anxiety. It can be great for that. If you know that there's something else going on, maybe some post-traumatic stress disorder, ADHD, or if they're any kind of neurodiverse condition, it's worth just treating it sensitively. Give them the choice whether to join in, allow them to keep their eyes open, keep activities short, keep to some of those, keep it a very well-rounded thing. It's not just about the meditation, it's about the kindness jar, the cloud watching, all of these different activities might start to have a benefit, but just keep an eye on those students. It's a really healing practice for many mental health challenges like depression and anxiety. It can be really great for that. There's lots of evidence around that, about the benefits for that, but if you have concerns, do just treat it sensitively. I think some teachers should practice it in the staff room before they come to the classroom. Definitely. That's why we've provided some resources for you too. It's a bit like reading. If you are seen to be reading, your children will read. You know what it feels like to read. You need to understand too. It's a prerequisite for anyone who wants to teach meditation formally, to train to teach it, that you need to have done quite a bit of meditation practice and mindfulness practice yourself to start with, so you understand what your students are needing to learn. Okay. If somebody doesn't want to do it, we don't force them, just allow them to sit out, and say that they're welcome to join when they want to join in if they want to, but maybe give them something quiet to do in the corner, maybe some mindful colouring, just ask them, do a little mindfulness activity that isn't involving meditation, maybe some colouring or writing. Okay. When's the next session? That's actually the last in our series for now, so do watch them back, and if you've got ideas for others, I'm sure Joanna would love to hear them, so do let her know. And you can find more information from me at www.nomoreshoulds.com as well. That's where I practice. So lovely. It was so nice to see you all, and we'll finish now. Do take care, everybody. Bye bye. Oh, I'll write it down. Sorry, yeah. This is my website. So this isn't the Pearson resources, but you can link. Ooh, sorry, I can't type. Whoop. No more shoulds.com. Here you are. Okay, so I should say that's my website. There's nothing to do with Pearson. Pearson's website has everything that we've worked on here. Okay, lovely. Well, do take care. And I will see you all again soon in some capacity. Do take care.